Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and thank you for joining us for today's Consensus Program webinar, an update on DOE Office of Fossil Energy's new Advanced Energy Storage Program. My name is Alex Krauka. I'm a Senior Program Coordinator here at the United States Energy Association. I work on our Consensus Program. The goal of which is to build both domestic and international consensus on clean coal technologies as well as carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So we're very excited to host NETL to give us this update on DOE's Office of Fossil Energy's Advanced Energy Storage Program. So with that, I will introduce our three speakers for today. Bhima Sastri of DOE will give a quick introduction. NETL's Briggs, who is the technology manager of their cross-cutting program, will be doing the majority of the presentation, and then NETL's Jeff Hoffman, who is an engineer and project manager at NETL, he will be facilitating the Q&A portion. Speaking of Q&A, we ask that you use the Q&A function within the Zoom app. It should be located at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type in your questions. We will wait until the end of the presentation to answer any questions. If there are any logistical questions, please add them in as well, and we will answer them via chat. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bhima Sastri, Director of the Cross-Cutting R&D and Systems Integration Program at DOE.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome everybody on this 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Welcome you all to this webinar on energy storage. On behalf of the Department of Energy and the Office of Fossil Energy, I really want to thank USEA for hosting this webinar for us. Looks like we are having some very active participation, more than 200 plus attendees as we speak. This just for us highlights the importance of this program. I really want to start off with a history of innovation in this last century. And almost always, innovations that changed our lives or how we operated came about when the energy storage issue was first resolved. Without batteries, we wouldn't have cars, we wouldn't have phones, there wouldn't be any computers. So by the end of last year, we saw how also this energy storage was beginning to impact the way we travel, with the Teslas that are there on the road, and the way we live, where we are beginning to see not just powering our cars, but our houses too, with storage type of devices. So this is a growing industry, and as many private studies have shown, the market for energy storage is expected to grow up to 10 to 20 billion by some studies in the year 2025. Next slide, please. So recognizing this, the Department of Energy has proposed a vision in which we see the U.S. establish a domestic supply chain for energy storage by 2030. We've started an Energy Storage Grand Challenge, which was announced recently, and will focus resources from across the DOE to create a comprehensive program to accelerate the development and commercialization of the next generation technology. And we see U.S. can take a global leadership in this, and we plan to accomplish this through this five-pronged approach. First is a technology development, where we want to establish ambitious, achievable performance goals for this R&D portfolio. Then we have technology transition that we're focusing on, where we accelerate the technology in the pipeline of all the research designs that are there for energy storage, and look at performance validation, citing tools, and all. And then we're also looking at policy and valuation where we develop best-in-class models for effective value propositions that we can get with storage technologies. We're also looking at domestic manufacturing and supply chain, where you look at new technologies for U.S. manufacturing, recyclability, and look at critical materials that are key to energy storage. And last but not least, we're looking at workforce and technical assistant, basically trying to develop programs where American workers will be ready for this 21st century energy storage value chain. So the Office of Fossil Energy is participating in this grand vision of the Department of Energy and the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. And we are working separately. Next slide, please. We're working with several offices across the Department of Energy to realize this Energy Storage Grand Challenge. The Grand Challenge, by the way, is also going on under progress. And next month, we are anticipating that we're going to hold a series of these type of webinars. We're expecting all of you participants to take part in that. And the result of that Energy Storage Grand Challenge meetings that we're going to conduct next month and is going to be a final Grand Challenge report that's going to come out, a roadmap, if you will, for what we are going to do in energy storage. So the Office of Fossil Energy is participating with all of these divisions, the Office of Science, for instance, and the ARPA-E agency, which is the Advanced Research Projects Agency that you all have heard of, along with all the other agencies in the Department of Energy here, which include Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, the Office of Electricity, the Nuclear Energy, and plus the Fossil Energy. And we're coordinating all of our efforts with the Office of Technology Transition as well as the Loan Program Office, the LPO. The goal that we have is to bring this basic storage R&D that we are conducting, not just at the basic energy level, but move it all the way down the chain to a commercialization strategy. So NETL is one of the labs, which is a National Energy Technology Lab. It is a premier lab for everything DOE does with the fossil assets. And we also work with a rich consortium of the 17 national labs that DOE supports in advancing many programs. Next slide, please. So from a fossil industry and power industry standpoint, achieving a stable, safe, and reliable energy production along with a good delivery infrastructure is absolutely necessary for the future economic growth and security. We all know that fossil fuel plants play a major role in satisfying our nation's electricity demand. Many studies have shown this. And what we're also seeing is that an increased renewable energy capacity, these plants, the fossil energy plants, are being asked to transition from base load to load following, requiring greater operational flexibility and also frequent startup and shutdowns. And this is causing a lot of issues related, to the current power plants, and they're being asked almost to not only for a faster grid response, but also for possessing a wider range of load range. So the Office of Fossil Energy is actively participating along with these other offices mentioned to address such issues. And we believe that energy storage technology and the application of these technologies can provide a significant benefit for future fossil energy power plants and for poly generation facilities and for applications like waste heat recovery. And today's webinar will touch on the program that our fossil energy department is pursuing to achieve these goals. And leading this work is Dr. Briggs White, who will be our next speaker. And along with Jeff Hoffman, he's helping FE formulate this program by leading all the efforts at NETL. Briggs serves as a technology manager at NETL, where he manages the energy storage program along with several other R&D programs, including high-performance materials and water management. He's a graduate of the University of Florida, where he did his PhD, specializing in solid-state, high-temperature electrochemical devices. And he's been a tremendous asset for DOE, and we're glad he's taking the lead in helping us push the much-needed R&D in this storage area. He will provide us with an overview of our program. Briggs?
All right. Thank you, Bhima, and thank you all for attending. I hope you're all staying safe during these trying times as we rediscover how to stay connected in our remote working environments. I, for myself, am speaking to you from my bedroom since my wife has taken our home office. And so I have here with me my gray and white cat named Tank to help me make sure this webinar goes off without a hitch. For today's objectives, I'm going to give you an update on our energy storage program. Bhima, thank you for that great introduction. And I hope you walk away with a better understanding of how some of the use cases associated specifically with fossil energy applications are applicable to energy storage. We've recently announced a notice of intent related to an FOA, a funding opportunity announcement, and we'll share a little bit more about that with you. And finally, I just wanted to really reiterate that we appreciate the stakeholder engagement. When we issued that a request for information back at the end of last calendar year, we heard from the stakeholders, we heard from you, and we've developed our program plans, including the notice of intent based on what we heard. So this webinar continues to build on that short legacy of listening to stakeholders. And to that end, we are going to have some polls associated with energy storage for fossil energy applications. And why don't we go ahead and initiate a couple of those polls. So the first poll question is, which energy storage technologies are of interest and suit your needs? So this is from in particular, an end user perspective, but anyone would be welcome to respond with these answers. All right, thank you for voting on that. And we can see the answers. We're just going to briefly share them here, and then we will revisit the answers and discuss them again at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. All right, let's look at our second question. All right, the second question is, what fossil-related applications of energy storage are most of interest? So looking at it from an end user application, we looked at it from an energy storage technology perspective in question 1, and question 2, we're looking at it more from an asset related perspective. So please go ahead and indicate your perspective. And we'll pause for a moment to let folks enter their poll responses, and then we'll display that information and then move forward with the webinar. Okay, interesting. Well, thank you all for responding. That information will be very useful to us moving forward as we plan our program. And like I said, we'll revisit that a little later in the hour. So for a little bit of context, our energy storage program, which is sponsored by DOE's Office of Fossil Energy, is nested within a portfolio of programs called Crosscutting Technology. And so there's 6 different programs which are sponsored by DOE's Office of Fossil Energy. And the energy storage program is a great example of those programs which focus on a wide range of assets and have a multiplier impact because of that. So we certainly know that energy storage is relevant for a wide range of use cases. Moving forward, we've developed this program to be relevant to a wide range of assets. We know that benefits to the asset owner include flexibility, asset life extension, and other things. But there's also benefits to the grid, which are really important in terms of reliability, especially with additional renewables coming onto the grid, and environmental performance, both because of optimization of the asset, as well as additional benefits to the grid in terms of clean energy. A variety of energy storage technologies may play a role in this program. We are taking a technology agnostic approach, but our early analysis and stakeholder input suggests that longer duration energy storage technologies may complement technologies such as batteries that are already commercially available. Those energy storage technologies which may play a role in this program include thermal energy storage, mechanical energy storage, chemical energy storage, which in particular holds an opportunity for very long, perhaps even seasonal duration energy storage, and then hybrid solutions. We'll be focusing on, in particular, commercialization and developing the use case information that can help drive and define needs for technology and project developers. The scope of the program, as Bhima said, certainly be focusing on the large scale electricity generating units, but also the smaller scale assets. We know that there's a lot of interest in enhancing flexibility. And those could include, for example, gas fueled combustion, single cycle combustion turbines, or perhaps reciprocating engines. And in some cases, those kind of assets may also have a role to play in the future decarbonization, where perhaps maybe they're run on hydrogen or ammonia or some other fuel, which can be a pathway towards a lower carbon footprint. And then also fossil fueled industrial facilities. We know through our network that there may be opportunities through petrochemical facilities, steel making, and other opportunities where both the thermal energy and the chemical energy perhaps can be leveraged through an energy storage technology, as well as the end use perhaps can be used in terms of load demand and so on. For some perspective on electricity generation and the fossil fleet, I turn to a annual energy outlook from EIA. This is their 2020 reference case. And a couple of key takeaways from this chart show that clearly nuclear and coal will decrease, but will remain as part of the picture, at least in the United States, out through 2050. And in fact, globally, coal will actually be a stronger portion of the future. But clearly renewables will increase their participation within the grid, as well as natural gas will come online, largely taking some of the capacity away from traditionally base-loaded resources like nuclear and coal. That's going to put a real challenge on the base-loaded assets and drive them more towards flexible operation, of which clearly energy storage will play a role. I mentioned batteries. The prices have come down on batteries in a really tremendous way in the recent period, much of that driven by transportation applications. And so that has spawned a number of deployments of batteries which augment pumped hydro in many cases for utility scale energy storage. But there are a number of other technologies beyond batteries, if you will, that perhaps have a role to play, particularly when integrating with large scale assets such as coal and gas plants. And in particular, when we're talking about additional revenue generating options and benefits associated with long duration energy storage. Here we just have a collection of some of the additional alternative energy storage technologies that may play a role with integrating with fossil assets. The nation's fossil fleet has been moved towards operating in a more flexible regime, and also the capacity factors have changed. Here we have a chart of capacity factor data for about the last decade. Capacity factor refers to the unitless ratio of actual electrical energy output over a given period of time compared to the maximum amount of output from that asset. And what you can see is that clearly all of the fossil-based units are operating less than 100% capacity factor. And so that means that there's additional opportunity when these units aren't being used to create electricity to perhaps capture waste heat or energy and repurpose that, whether to do arbitrage or time shifting to create additional revenue streams, or simply to help accommodate that flexibility and perhaps extend the life of an asset. To show that in a time sense, here we have a quote duck curve, or how the electricity shape looks over a period of time in California and California's ISO. And so here you see for the last few years a few different curves. Also interesting to note in the 2020, here we have some demand changing its profile due to the COVID-19 phenomena. But we would expect that that will return in future years. And so there will be certainly an opportunity for energy storage to help play a role with reliability, as well as maintaining optimum asset usage in ISOs such as CAISO. But this isn't only in areas like California in PJM. We also have a duck curve, if you will, and in areas additionally around the country, similar phenomena can be observed. Here we have the overall curve shape. These are for the month of March. And what you can see is that clearly there is an increase in the shoulders associated with the days, and an opportunity to do some time shifting of that energy to help best balance the generation and the demand profiles. Energy storage can serve a lot of different roles, offer a lot of different benefits in various use cases. We're already seeing, for example, batteries being used to provide some of the shorter duration services and generate additional revenue streams to asset owners. But additionally, moving forward, particularly as costs come down and as new technologies are matured, longer duration energy storage technologies may hold an opportunity to provide additional revenue streams and benefits to asset owners. And so here in a figure from an NRECA report, we show a few different kinds of applications of energy storage dependent on the duration of that energy storage capacity. I'd also like to just lift up hydrogen energy storage in particular. The Office of Fossil Energy has been investing in hydrogen-related technologies for years, and those could include, for example, coal gasification, where you use carbon capture and storage to convert coal to hydrogen and carbon monoxide, which can be used, for example, in a hydrogen turbine. But additionally, today, commercial technology can be used for steam methane reforming of natural gas to create hydrogen, in particular when integrated with CCS. And so there already is in existence an infrastructure for hydrogen generation, so-called blue hydrogen generation, because it comes from a fossil source. Nevertheless, especially including CCS, this creates hydrogen which can be used for downstream applications. In future scenarios, particularly as renewables become a stronger component of our overall electricity generation portfolio, electrolysis or other technologies could be used to create hydrogen, which could perhaps supplement or complement hydrogen created through fossil resources. So clearly, hydrogen energy storage is an enabling mechanism for a future decarbonized hydrogen economy. And additionally, hydrogen end uses also include power generation as a relatively near-term opportunity, but perhaps, especially with additional innovation, we can start to decarbonize some of the harder to decarbonize sectors, such as industrial applications like steel making, as well as transportation. So given that, and especially since co-locating energy storage with fossil assets is perhaps new to some stakeholders that may be attending this webinar, I thought I'd spend a few minutes reiterating the business case and benefits that this program will focus on. First of all, as I said, these assets are operating in a flexible mode, and perhaps energy storage could be used to capture the wasted plant heat and repurpose that for a beneficial reuse. That would ultimately lead to lower customer costs. It also, by deploying energy storage at large scale and in large amounts, could perhaps provide a benefit in terms of reliability and resiliency, both as renewables are a stronger component of the grid, but also in the case of an unplanned event, whether it's a cyber attack, a natural gas infrastructure outage, or a natural disaster, energy storage could provide a benefit to the grid. And here on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, I'd also just like to remark that energy storage clearly could benefit the environment. It would benefit the environment in terms of cleaner electricity, both because the fossil assets themselves could be operated in a more efficient and optimized manner, but also because they would be able to enable additional clean energy in the form of renewables to come onto the grid because of the additional energy storage located with those fossil assets. Clearly, there's an optimization with respect to the footprint of assets. And so if we can better leverage existing generation and T&D, transmission and distribution infrastructure, we don't have to create new, and energy storage offers the opportunity in some cases to defer additional build out of infrastructure. And then, like I said, there will be some reduction in idling, which clearly has a benefit in terms of reduction in CO2 footprint. But there's more to do. We need to monetize the technical benefits. There's a lot of uncertainty with respect to how much the energy storage will cost, but also how much benefit will be returned to the asset owner, the grid, and the environment. And so we need to clarify what those benefits are to the various stakeholders. We need to increase capital, and not just capital to do some pilot scale or large demonstration scale work to help understand those benefits, but also the R&D. And so we know that from the private sector perspective, there's clearly an interest in investing in energy storage projects. We want to clarify the value proposition to enable that capital to flow to those project and technology developers, but also through federal funding, we hope to be able to make a contribution to help reduce barriers. We need to identify adequate land. We heard from our RFI that some asset owners, particularly of fossil assets, may not have available space, may need compact energy storage solutions. We're going to be scaling up pilot projects. So we need to think about what's the right scale that can then take the following steps towards demonstration and ultimately commercialization, identify capital, understand what those projects will take in terms of time and technical scope. And then we need to demonstrate the social benefits to get stakeholders on board. So our approach is to support the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. We've been doing that through trying to help better define the use cases and also distill the technology development metrics. We've been doing that in coordination with other parts of the department. We're trying to better understand the market needs, trying to listen to stakeholders and do analysis. And we're trying to identify pathways for storage maturation. Like I said, we're taking a technology agnostic approach in terms of the energy storage technology, but we want to make sure that we can advance some technology and do it sooner than later so that we can, quote, as it were, put steel on the ground consistent with some of the utility perspectives we've heard. And then finally, we are going to make investments in R&D, and we are going to be doing it in a way that hopefully we can attract capital or at least reduce barriers to ultimately deploying that technology. I mentioned a request for information. We issued that back the end of last calendar year. And so we've had some early engagement. We had over 20 different companies respond to that. We had a really strong response from the organizations associated with technology development. And moving forward, we recognize that we need to better understand the end use requirements. And so we put a lot of effort into reaching out to potential end users. And I want to thank all of those that we have received input on so far. And moving forward, we would certainly like to hear your perspective to help better refine those use cases. We participated in a workshop that was co-organized with other organizations. And we have the presentations associated with that workshop on our NETL website. The address is there, and that'll be there for you when we send around the slides after this webinar is over. And then, as Bhima mentioned, the Energy Storage Grand Challenge, the DOE-wide initiative on energy storage, we are looking forward to reconvening those workshops in a webinar format at some point coming soon. What we heard from the RFI is that the energy storage technologies that are best suited for fossil applications are really span a range of TRLs, technology readiness levels, from sort of the TRL 2-3, where we have still applied but relatively basic research, all the way up through what one could refer to as commercialized technology. You can see based on the color coding that they range from thermal energy storage to chemical and mechanical energy storage and some other types. And one thing I'll just remark, particularly with respect to the higher TRL technologies, is some of those were advanced to a commercial state for a specific application, but that application may or may not be the same as a particular use case that this program may focus on. So there may be additional work associated with integrating some of these relatively mature technologies with fossil energy applications. This program will dedicate effort specifically on those fossil applications. And so our preliminary vision associated with technology development is as shown on the slide. We would intend to advance some innovative concepts that perhaps would synchronize very well with a particular high-value market sector or application. We also know that there are some mid-TRL technologies that are at, if you will, the component level that haven't necessarily been integrated with fossil assets, but still need to work out the kinks specifically with respect to the energy storage. And so we know that we need to advance some of those technologies. And then finally, we know there's a lot of work in terms of integrating energy storage technologies with fossil assets. And then ultimately, perhaps beyond the scope of this program, would be demonstrations. And certainly, we want to interact with folks that think that they are ready for near-term application and find a way either to work with them within the program or to find other opportunities, for example, DOE's loan program office, to connect them with capital and other opportunities that they need to get those deployments done. But ultimately, all of this technology development has to be lined up with particular use cases. And so really there's a matrix here of the various energy technologies being advanced, but also having them line up with a variety of market sectors, which may or may not have overlapping or different metrics and needs. And so the outcomes could include maturing long-duration energy storage technologies, field testing near-term energy storage technologies. We want to be able to do something near-term and get some wins. And we want to support commercialization and deployment. As Bhima said, the department is interested in the United States having a strong role in commercialization and being globally competitive, and we certainly want to be a supporter of that. So some of our initial projects in this space have included NETL itself, both NETL research as well as through the consortium known as IDEAS, which is the Institute for the Design of Advanced Energy Systems. A lot of that work has been analytical in nature. We've also been working with EPRI, Lehigh, and WVU, doing analyses, but also doing some field testing, if you will, of thermal energy storage technologies. Those have been some of the first projects that fossil energy has funded. Also, fossil energy has a flagship initiative called Coal First. And here you have the projects identified by some of the participants in that program. The goals associated with Coal First include flexibility, high efficiency, etc. And energy storage is included in many of those concepts. Those will be designs that will be matured for full-scale coal power plants with CCS. And so those future-looking designs will provide designs for integrating energy storage with full-scale coal power plants. So some quite advanced design work looking at integrating with fossil assets. I mentioned the notice of intent for a potential funding opportunity announcement. The objectives will be to drive towards near-term system integrated energy storage that will be integrated with fossil assets. We'll also be looking to advance some of those component level mid-TRL energy storage technologies and get them ready for integration. And then finally, we want to make an investment in low TRL concepts that really potentially offer game-changing benefits when integrated with a fossil asset. Some important considerations. We will be offering a teaming partner list, so particularly for stakeholders, host sites, perhaps folks that are interested in being a consultant or a sub-recipient on a project and may not be interested in putting in an application as the prime recipient. We will have the opportunity for you to offer up your contact information and express your interest in teaming. So look forward to that. It will be really important that potential applicants to this FOA have multidisciplinary partners and include industry. Like we said, we're very much interested in commercialization. So we want to make sure that the team members include folks that have that subject matter expertise and understand the end user perspective so that the technology can be developed in a way that it's of interest ultimately for commercialization. Look for the FOA either on NETL's business page, or you can also sign up on FedConnect or grants.gov with your business's information so that you can get a notification when the FOA is released. And then finally, once the FOA is released, we will announce the specific time and registration information associated with a second informational webinar where you can find out more information about how to get engaged. So moving forward, we will be participating along with the balance of the department in the workshops that will be rescheduled as webinars associated with the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. One of the use cases associated with the draft roadmap that will be the focus of those webinars will be focused specifically on flexible large facilities, which will have a lot of relevance to our program. And so we'll be looking for stakeholder feedback on particular that use case. And there's more information at the web address down below specifically on the Grand Challenge. So as we conclude, I'd like to thank the Department of Energy's headquarters. Bhima Sastri, thanks so much for being our champion within fossil energy. I'd like to thank all of the NETL staff that have helped us shape this program. I'd like to thank USEA for hosting us in this webinar. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for providing input and attending this webinar. So in conclusion, we will need to identify the technologies with significant benefits that line up with fossil energy applications. We want to make sure that this can be done in a way that enhances fossil energy efficiency and reliability, but also generates the benefits to the grid and for the clean environment associated with the nation. We're going to need to do a lot of work to refine the techno-economics and clarify the value propositions of these particular technologies. We're going to be developing and working with our partners to improve technologies, integrate them, and clarify those value propositions. And this is going to be a process that's not going to be done in a year or two. We're certainly hoping to make some strong progress in the next few years, but we know that there are going to be many challenges along the way, and we're going to need partners and stakeholders that can help make sure we're going in the right direction and work with us to conduct the R&D and understand all the challenges and move forward. So with that, I want to thank all of you for joining us here this morning. And now I want to turn it over to Jeff Hoffman, who will be leading our question and answer session. Jeff's a senior engineer with NETL. He has a large range of experience spanning almost 20 years from advanced energy technology research, development, and demonstration efforts. He is responsible for technical oversight of a portfolio of in-house research that includes analysis aimed at improving the performance and flexibility of fossil assets. Jeff is an SME, or subject matter expert in energy storage, and he also led the use case specifically for the flexible facilities associated with the Energy Storage Grand Challenge that we talked about a little bit earlier. So before we kick off our question and answer session, let's get started with another quick poll. So Alex, could you please put up the last round of our questions? So here we have our third poll question. The question is, what is the most important characteristic of an energy storage solution when deciding to invest on a project? All right. Low capital cost. All right, very good. Do we have any additional questions? All right. Poll question number 4. How can DOE best engage stakeholders of its new advanced energy storage program? You can select multiple choice. All right. All right, very good. Well, why don't I turn it over to Jeff, and Jeff is going to lead us through our Q&A.
Thank you, Briggs. Before we proceed into the Q&A discussion, first I'd like to bring to your attention, Briggs, that a number of the early questions are program related, so I'll defer to you on answering those, and if you want to take a moment or two to look at those. And in the meantime, I'd just like to highlight one of the engagement opportunities in the final poll, and I was pleased to see it was the one that received the highest response, is the opportunity for collaborative and research and partnerships. So NETL is always interested in these types of efforts, and particularly those with industry partners that are able to provide or at least facilitate the collection of robust real-world data and information that's needed to ensure that R&D efforts target deployable concepts, especially those that are cost-effective, as in the highest-rated poll result, unsurprisingly, of the one that preceded that last one. And as was mentioned throughout, additional information will be sent to the participants of this webinar. And I'd also like to mention that, actually, I believe that, let me take a look. Yes, there will be a recording and slides posted following this webinar. But would also like to point to the URL in the bottom left-hand corner of this final slide. This is the URL for NETL's Energy Storage Program webpage. We are in the process of updating this page and are intending to add additional contact information, particularly for those that are interested in reaching out to the NETL research community for again, these partnership and collaboration opportunities. So to that end, I'll encourage all interested participants to visit this website, as well as stay tuned for the subsequent information and upcoming engagement opportunities mentioned by Briggs. Ideally, we will have the new points of contact added soon, but in the meantime, feel free to reach out to Briggs or Bhima or any of us on this last page. And so with that, I'll defer the first 3 questions to Briggs, and I'll read them so that all can hear. We have a question that states individual is wondering if there is, at this stage, any guidelines or efforts with regards to focus on a few best candidates instead of such a wide range of solutions during the TMCES 2020, that where it was found that there are a lot of energy storage options, most in development, and that there's not a lot of clarity for end users to focus?
So I guess my initial reaction is that I don't think that we know enough to set aside any particular options. We are certainly using both analysis and stakeholder input to help guide how this program matures. But I think right now, while we do have some internal perspective, we would not prohibit any particular technology other than perhaps fully commercial technologies, which would be not a good use of taxpayer funds. So I don't know that we are narrowing the field at this moment. I think that we are keeping it relatively open. Bhima, do you have any additional comments on that?
I agree with you, Briggs. I think this is an R&D funding program, and we are looking at new innovative ways to address this storage issue, and we don't want to tie ourselves to any particular technology in any way.
The next question asks whether subsurface energy storage is part of the program.
So I think the short answer is yes, absolutely, it would be part of it. I think you could conceive of, for example, geothermal or hydrogen or compressed air energy storage all having subsurface elements to them. We would need to understand specifically what is being conceived of, but I don't see any reason why that would be off the table. So I think the answer is yes.
And then the third question is, will this FOA include flow battery technology?
So given the procurement sensitivity associated with an FOA and the fact that so far we have only released a notice of intent and have not released the FOA or the potential FOA, I can't speak to the FOA directly. I can say from a program perspective, we are, like I said, technology agnostic. And to the extent that a flow battery technology may integrate well with a fossil asset, I think that would certainly be of interest to us. We also know that the department, thinking here in particular of OE and ARPA-E, have invested in flow battery technology, perhaps among others, and we would want to leverage that investment as well. So, you know, aside from investing in fully commercial technologies, which would be off the table, we would certainly be interested in understanding if there's an opportunity where flow batteries could provide a benefit to fossil assets.
Okay, another one that's program related, since the amendment to the NOI 2331 specifically includes hydrogen as having potential for energy storage, can DOE clarify what hydrogen technologies with zero or near zero emissions DOE is looking for? Options might be hydrogen from electrolysis based on electricity from a fossil fuel fired power plant with carbon capture, natural gas reforming with CO2 capture, or even gasification of fossil fuels.
So I'll attempt to answer that one, but may need a little bit more time to reserve my answer. And Bhima, feel free to jump in here. My sense is that we want to focus particularly in this program on the energy storage technology and the key aspects associated with integrating it with an asset. So I don't think that our program scope would tend to place lots of emphasis on the, for example, upstream conversion of coal through gasification to create a hydrogen fuel. However, to the extent that the hydrogen energy storage aspect of the technology concept required integration with an upstream asset, I think that would be on the table, but I don't think that our scope would go into, for example, developing an additional gasification technology. We already have a gasification program that does that.
Okay, so scrolling through many of these questions, a lot of them are program focused, so I will give Briggs at least a very short breather and take one that's more technical. The question, why did one of the slides say that latent heat thermal energy storage has a TRL level 1 to 3, and then goes on to mention that concentrated solar power plants have operated for 15 to 20 years and supplied electricity with molten salt thermal energy storage. It should be TRL 10. And that, of course, is true for the molten salt technology. There are a handful of latent heat thermal energy storage technologies that are also being reviewed. So it's likely appropriate to show a wider range. I'm not sure, it may have been communicated in that slide, just a little bit disjointed, but the point is well taken, and agree that for CSP plants, there are commercially available deployed representations of the molten salt thermal energy. Oh, sorry, the screen is jumping a little bit on me. Follow-up question, this is program related, is the FOA should be clear on whether you are converting electricity into thermal energy storage and back, round trip, or fossil energy converted to thermal energy storage temporarily, and then converted to electricity at a later time. The second is at high TRL. And so before I defer it to Briggs from the FOA perspective, I will agree that at least for the CSP technologies, the temporarily converting thermal to electricity at a later time is at a high TRL. But again, point back to advanced technologies that are currently of interest. And then to the extent that, Briggs, you want to respond to the clarity between fossil energy or round trip efficiency, electricity back to thermal energy storage and back, or the latter?
I'm just going to take the comment and appreciate that we should be as clear as possible rather than trying to respond to it directly in this Q&A. But I appreciate the comment, and we will try to address that.
Okay, we have about 7 minutes left before noon, so I'll scroll through and see if there's a couple of ones that we haven't really touched on so far. There's a question that asks, notes that there have been several articles about fires related to lithium batteries. Will this be reviewed by DOE? I don't think any of us are going to speak on behalf of DOE as a whole, but operability and safety are always concerns when DOE does technology R&D, and it is always a concern of commercial deployment. So in respect to technologies that are within the FE purview, the operability and the safety are very important concerns that are routinely addressed. There's a question on, do you have targets for the cost and performance that different energy storage technologies need to hit, especially hydrogen, in order to be deployed at any meaningful scale? So I'll let Briggs weigh in after I finish with a couple of comments, but that is one of the real challenges that we are looking right now, is what are meaningful cost and performance targets, particularly for non-battery technologies that are integrated within a specific application in a specific plant. There are a number of batteries provide a range of services, not just electrons that get provided to the grid. And just as an example, in a integrated energy storage with a fossil plant, there is the ability to positively impact the operations of that fossil plant, allow it to operate routinely at a higher higher operating point with higher efficiency, as opposed to a plant that would have to ramp down to a very low inefficient state, or even shut down and then be brought online sometime later. So identifying and targeting specific metrics is one of the focus of areas of this early phase of the FE energy storage program. And Briggs, I'll allow you to jump in if you'd like to add or augment anything.
No, I think that's right on. When we issued our request for information, we specifically requested input on metrics or targets, and we heard from stakeholders what key metrics characteristics are really important. And so we certainly have an eye on that. But in terms of specific targets associated with a specific use case, we feel like there's more work to be done in order to define that. Clearly, some of that is technical, and some of that will depend on the particular circumstances of a market sector. And so we need to gather that input, both analytically and from stakeholders. And then I think we can better refine those targets. But at this point, I think it's premature, or at least we don't have clearly defined targets for all of the use cases that are of interest to us. So I think the short answer is no, we don't have targets, but it's absolutely something we're very keen to develop and refine so that we can then focus the R&D in a meaningful way.
There's a question that I'll tee up to Briggs. Are you able to take some supplementary comments, follow-ons to the RFI now that the NOI has been issued?
Absolutely. Let's not let the formality of the RFI process hold back an information exchange. So as Jeff mentioned, our contact information is available on the slide. It'll also be on our website, and we're going to send around the slides after the webinar. If you would like to re-engage with us, please do. We'd be happy to receive your input. Just as a caveat, if you do want to have an exchange specific to the notice of intent or the FOA, we will have to go through an official process, which will include FedConnect, so that the question and answer are made available to all potential interested applicants so that there's an open and level playing field. But we're absolutely interested in receiving your input, whether it's on the state of a technology or on potential end user needs.
And so we are just about out of time. There are many good questions here, many of which are related to the FOA timing. And I'll come back to that in a second, but I just want to say that all of these questions are appreciated and will be considered as we move forward with the FE program, even though we can't answer them all online or all during this webinar. There's one particular question that I was going to address. Are you looking at more commercially ready applications which require deeper level of R&D/innovation? This is both programming and technical related. We're looking for technologies, we're looking for innovation, and we're looking for technologies that have the ability and likelihood to be deployed and bring meaningful benefits. Many of the questions throughout here also spoke to the benefits, including the services that energy storage provides. One of the complexities that we're well aware of with integrating fossil or energy storage technologies with any type of other more conventional generating technologies is the control aspect of it and the integration aspect of it. So that's where we see a lot of the R&D and innovation needs. And so I'll tee that up to Briggs if he wants to make any comments on that.
Yeah, I guess I see the program clearly. We want to have benefits both for the asset owner, the grid, and for the environment. We want to do something that's relevant in the near term, but we also want to address the needs of the ultimate asset integration, which may require a substantial amount of innovation. We have this new Congress as appropriated, or this new program is appropriated by Congress in FY20. And I think it addresses a need, which is that the energy storage solutions and the integration requirements have not been addressed for all of the fossil applications of interest. And so I think that for certain combinations of energy storage technologies and applications, perhaps there are mature solutions where it's more of an integration and field test and operation kind of activity that's required. But there may be other combinations where, perhaps there's an opportunity to generate a lot of benefits, but we need to take a step back and do some more innovating at a lower TRL. So we're interested, I think, in all kinds of things that, based on what makes sense.
And so I think the last question that we'll take is the timing on the FOA. Again, Briggs, you mentioned, some things that can and can't be discussed or disclosed, but is there anything that you can comment on the timing?
I can't address that any more than to say what was specifically listed in the notice of intent. Like I said, if you are interested, please do sign up and keep an eye out on NETL's business page. And also, now that you've participated in this webinar, we can certainly make you available or make you aware of when we do issue that funding opportunity announcement.
And so with that, I'd like to thank everyone, and I'll give Briggs and Bhima an opportunity for any last comments, and then we'll close out this webinar.
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone for participating, and we really appreciate the stakeholder engagement. I want you to know that this won't be the last time that we will reach out to stakeholders to get your input, as well as to have you partner with us on projects moving forward. And so thank you for that, and really appreciate all the attendance today. Bhima?
Thank you, Briggs. I think this was really quite amazing for us in terms of not just the input that we've gotten from and the number of participants that are there and the interest in the FOA. So I suggest that all of you do take a look at the NOI that came out and try to participate as much as possible. A lot of questions related to the FOA. And thank you all again for attending today's webinar, and really appreciate all the inputs. And thank you, Briggs, for a wonderful presentation.
And thank you, Jeff.
And thanks to all. Okay, with that, we'll close the webinar.